Okay, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar on cultivating future leaders. This is a really great case study about how AmeriGas built a leadership pipeline. And we're really excited to share some of those best practices and tips with you today. And along the way, we'll share some ideas that hopefully you can use within your organization. Just given the length of the webinar, since it's quite short, we'd like to hold all questions until the end. So with that, I'm very excited to introduce our partner at AmeriGas, Justine Staub, the Director of Workforce Development. Justine, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you, Darlene, and good afternoon, everyone.
So before we take a deeper dive at AmeriGas and the situation that they went through with their own pipeline, let's take a few minutes up front to look at sort of the business context. So why are we here today talking about succession management and cultivating future leaders? Many of you are probably very familiar with the statistics and the reality that talent attraction and retention is a critical risk for many organizations. This is just one particular statistic from Aon Hewitt from this year, actually, that looks at the severity of this. And if you look at Harvard Business Review and a lot of other sources, you'll see very similar statistics. And surprisingly, despite the significance of this, of having a talent shortage, despite this, and again, when you think about the fact that having a talent shortage really does impact an organization's ability to execute its strategy, only 15% of the companies surveyed by Harvard Business Review in this particular case had an adequate pipeline for key leadership positions. So when you think about that, 15% is a really low number. So what's the problem? And again, we've done a lot of work on this, and there's a lot of research on this, but there's really two things that fundamentally, when you look out there at all of the research and the consulting in this area, that seems to be a barrier for many organizations. And the first is that organizations sometimes are more reactive versus more planful at succession and cultivating future leaders. And what we find is that they don't necessarily invest in a formal or robust process for identifying and developing future leaders. So that's the first thing. And then in addition to that, there's a lot of other organizations who are investing quite a bit of money and time into identifying people who are not really their high potential employees. And I think many of us can relate to that. So this is where we're promoting people based on things like performance versus their actual potential. And we'll talk about that in a second. So what's the business case to investing in high potentials? And again, there's a lot of research on this, and this is just one source from CEB Talent Management that's actually new that shows that high potential employees are 2 times as valuable to your organization. The challenge, though, is that organizations who are being reactive and who don't have those formal processes in place to identify them, what ends up happening is that they're not really getting a good return on their investment. So statistics like 55% of them are dropping out of a development program within 5 years because they were really never the right high potential employees in the first place. Or you might see statistics like 46% of employees are failing to meet their objectives once they're promoted to their new role. And again, you know, we can probably all think of an example of where we've seen an employee promoted maybe for the wrong reason, maybe because there was no other successor, and unfortunately we didn't necessarily set that individual up for success. And again, this is a very, very common problem. So one of the things that I think it means is that we need to shift our thinking a little bit. Again, when you look at statistics like this, they're quite shocking. Only 1 in 7 employees are actually high potential employees. So 1 in 7 high performing employees. And that's actually quite shocking because many of us believe that if we promote our high-performing salespeople or high-performing IT people, regardless of their functional area, that they will be successful. But what we find is that many of these employees are functional experts or technical experts, but they don't really have an interest in a leadership role. Or maybe they're not ready, or they don't have the skills required to take on additional leadership responsibility. So what that really boils down to is that performance is not necessarily the best predictor of potential. High potential is really 3 key things. One's ability, their desire or willingness to move into a new role or take on additional responsibility, and their commitment. And you really do need all 3 of those things. So if you think about it and you're just promoting your high-performing salespeople, then there's a big missed opportunity there because we're not really looking at the extent to which these individuals have the potential to take on more responsibility over time. So through some of the best practices that we'll talk about today, and in particular the AmeriGas case study that we're excited to share with you, hopefully we can give you some suggestions and ideas about how to overcome some of these challenges. So with that, Justine is going to take us through a little bit of how AmeriGas proactively addressed their talent pipeline issue.
Okay, thanks, Darlene. Well, first of all, just let me tell you just a little bit about AmeriGas. We're a national company. We have between 9 and 10,000 employees at any given time. We have about maybe between 800 and 900 locations across the country. We service all 50 states. And we have somewhere between 700 and 800 managers in our company. So what we found, or how we found, in terms of this topic, what happened is that we realized that the area director position is really a linchpin position for our company. It's operations based. They're really the folks that are responsible for driving day-to-day operations, profitability, et cetera. But we really had no bench to fill the positions when they came open. And in addition, when we would promote from within, the folks that were in those roles or moved into those roles had a really tough transition. So we decided that we really had to do something about that to give ourselves a bench for moving people into those roles. So from there, we partnered with On Point Consulting, and we developed a high potential program that would allow us, first of all, to identify who our high potential folks were. I mean, we have 800 managers across, between like 600 and 700 managers across the country, but we really had no method to identify who our high potentials were. And it was sort of by chance if we discovered them. And this way we wanted to be able to put something in place where we had an organized way of identifying them and being able to evaluate their skills. And then be able to provide those folks with some kind of training that would accelerate their development to be able to be that bench for an area director position. The first thing that we had to do was put together what we're calling the AD success profile. At the time that we put this in place, we had just gone through a major acquisition where we acquired a company that was almost as large as we were. And there was the area director role really needed some clarification across all business units. And so we had to do some work to put that together for that reason, and also going into the program, because we wanted to be able to fully articulate what was involved in the area director role. The success profile is something a little bit more than a job description. It really gets at what a person needs to do to be successful in the role, speaks to the competencies that are required for an area director. It also, there's a segment of it that is a narrative about a day in the life of an area director. So it really gives a clear idea of what is required for the position. We had a lot of district managers out there that, they just automatically thought that they were, that they could take on the role without really knowing what it took to perform successfully in the role. So that's why we started with the AD success profile, and it became a part of the selection process.
And I think one of the things, as Justine was saying, that actually became quite useful, and we'll see this in the selection process in a minute, is that we called it a realistic job preview. That day in a life really helps people determine whether or not this particular role was a good fit for them. Do they want to travel this much? Do they want to manage this many people, and those sorts of things? So it allowed people an opportunity to self-select out if this wasn't a good fit for them. So some of the best practices that we used when we were developing the success profile and the realistic job preview was looking at, the critical positions. With AmeriGas, it was quite clear that the area director role was a feeder population, or feeder position rather, for others, and we needed to focus on that particular role. But within your own organization, there might be more than one role that is sort of a critical point where you're going to have a potential need or a potential gap in your bench strength over time. So identifying the key positions based on your future business strategy is really a best practice. And then looking, as Justine said, at what are those competencies and behaviors that define success is critical. But again, more importantly, focusing on the future success rather than just generic leadership competencies. There's a lot of good competency models out there, and it's fine to leverage those. But I think the organizations who do this better than others try to be more future focused and look at how might this role change over the next 1 to 3 years, and let's make sure that our success profile reflects the business environment in the future. So here's what we did. So now we're at the point where we have that success profile. We know sort of what we're looking for, and we're at the point where we need to identify the high potential employees. So this is just a graphic that illustrates the selection funnel, or the selection process, if you will. And starting at the left, what we did was AmeriGas came up with eligibility criteria, so things like tenure, different types of performance status, all these different criteria that people had to meet those criteria in order to even be eligible for this ALP, or Accelerated Leadership Program. And so we sent a letter out with those eligibility criteria and a link where people had to view the success profile and read the realistic job preview to 749 managers. So it was quite a big audience. And after people went through that, they had an opportunity to opt in or opt out of the program. And what happened was 300 people opted in. So from the 750 or so folks, 300 decided that this was something that they were interested in. And then from there, we narrowed it down, and 85 managers were invited to complete an assessment on each of the candidates. So this is the boss of the people who were invited into the program. And they completed a custom potential tool that we put together, because again, we know these folks are generally strong performers, but we want to really differentiate the people who have the future potential to take on more. And we'll show you an example in a few minutes of what this looks like. So the other benefit, I think, Justine, you'd probably agree, of including the managers of this population was that it got their buy-in to the process. So they felt like they had a voice. And this was the first year AmeriGas was doing something like this, and I think we all agreed that this would be really important to get their buy-in. So from there, we had the data on 85 people, and 82 people were selected to move on to the final phase of the assessment. And now we're sort of assessing the actual candidates. So the 82 candidates were invited to complete 2 tests. One was a situational judgment test, which is a multiple choice test that gives people a day in the life of an area director by completing a series of challenging situations that area directors face. And we actually put this together by looking at and interviewing high-performing and high-potential area directors. And people were asked how they would respond to this. And again, this is based on the area director success profile and what area directors do. This test really gives us a good view of, do these individuals know what to do in these particular situations? So it tests their knowledge of what to do in an area director role. And then in addition to that, we also wanted to use a legally valid personality test or leadership questionnaire that looked at people's leadership preferences and potential obstacles or derailers, and the extent to which those preferences either aligned or did not align with the area director role. So we took all of that data, and the last phase was a talent review meeting where senior leaders came together to review all of the candidate data and had a really good, robust discussion about, if this person should be in Y, if this person should not be in Y, and it really forced people to be objective when we were looking at talent. It also forced people to get on the same page as to what good looks like, which I think was something that was new for the organization. So this is just a quick snapshot of what the selection funnel looked like if you look at the participant numbers, starting with the 749 and really narrowing it down to the 21 managers that we believe from all this data, this robust data, had the most potential to move on. And the 21 managers that you see here were the folks who were invited to participate in the Accelerated Leadership Program. So when we put that together, some best practices to think about were using a variety of tests. And the ones that I showed you were ones that we chose that were really greatly matched to the area director success profile. So I think what's important is not just how many tests you use or how many assessments you use, but the extent to which those are actually measuring the critical factors that you're looking for in the particular role or the particular job. Making sure that they're rigorous, that they're legally defensible if this is an important part of your selection and succession process. And then when we did the mapping, we really looked at and tried to color code people to say, of the 82 who went through those assessments, let's really map people to understand how people are differentiated, and we use the talent review meeting to support those decisions. It could, you don't necessarily need a talent review meeting, but I think having done this now with AmeriGas for 2 years, I think the talent review meetings have gotten better and better, and it really has pushed people to defend their decisions and not just make a decision based on something more subjective. So before we take a look at what happened after we invited the 21 people, I just wanted to share with you a few quick examples of some of the assessments that we used. So this is an example of just one competency on the potential inventory. And again, this was an assessment that was sent out to the manager of the folks going through this. We were asking them to assess the individual's potential on several of the AD success factors. And then in addition, this is an example of the SJT, or situational judgment, which again was the series of challenging situations where people had to identify how they would respond. And when we interviewed the current AD population, the people who were high performing, we used what they would do as sort of the best in class response, and we were able to assess people accordingly. And then from there, we color-coded people and set Justine and her senior team up for the talent review meeting. Justine, maybe you can talk a little bit about your perception of that meeting and then take us through the actual program.
Sure. Well, the talent review meeting starts out with each member has this particular report that really shows how everybody did in terms of each of the assessments that we put them through, as well as some comments that their supervisor has made. The report is actually put together ranked by the score. So as far as the all of the assessments, we average them, and then the members are ranked according to how they scored. The talent review meeting is an opportunity to go through each person in rank order and decide whether or not they are in or out of the program. Each vice president speaks for the people that fall underneath them in the organization, and they are the determining factor, along with their immediate staff, their HR person, and other senior operations folks, to actually make the decision whether they're in or out. In the event that they decide that they do not want to include them, there is a robust discussion around why they're not being selected. And sometimes it's just a matter of they want to defer them to another year, and, depending on what's going on in that person's career at that particular time, they might make decisions to defer. Sometimes they have other reasons why they just don't want them to be in the program, and they're thoroughly vetted at this meeting. So we go through the report line by line, person by person, until we have the number of folks that we're looking to put into the program for that year. I can't tell you how important that this meeting is, and to make sure that you end up with the right folks in the program. The people that are in the program really reflect the program itself. So you want to make sure that from an external standpoint, that everybody views the program as really having the cream of the crop in the program. Another thing to consider is actually believing in the data. And Darlene will back me up on this. Our very first talent review meeting, we had some VPs who wanted to kind of dig deeper into the ranking and pull some folks out and put them in the program that were more or less toward the bottom of the ranking because they felt that they had better insight and they didn't really trust the data. And as it turns out, it was really not a good decision, and the folks that were plucked from farther down in the ranking either didn't make it or were, were not really performing well within the program. So this year, when we went through the talent review meeting, it was a little bit easier because everybody felt a little bit better about the process and believing in the process and the assessment. So as a result, I think this year we have a more robust cohort going through the program. Okay, so this is kind of a look at the program and the events that we put them through. You can really structure this however you want, but we, through the guidance with On Point, came up with this program. We start off with a kickoff event, and I'll go into some detail about that in a minute. But as far as the kickoff event is concerned, it's really a way of evaluating the folks that you've chosen for the program and being able to take a look at their skills and to see where the gaps are and in between where they stand now and where they would need to be in terms of being promoted. So it's a series of activities and a series of evaluations, and I'll talk about that in a second. In addition, we have the interactive classroom-based learning, which in our program happens in 3 separate on-site meetings where we introduce leadership skills to the folks. We also have business knowledge classes for them and a variety of different things that we provide on site. In addition to that, we introduce action learning projects where we divide the cohort up into a variety of teams that work on AmeriGas challenges, and they work on them throughout the year and then end up doing a presentation at the end of the program to senior leaders on their findings. This is just a look at the agenda for the kickoff event. As I said, we invite those that we've selected to a 3-day on-site meeting. The folks arrive and they each have their own individual agenda where we put them through a series of activities. Could be a case study, they do presentations, they participate in role plays, they have some group activities, and each one of these activities is assessed by our internal assessors who will give very specific behavioral feedback for each of these people. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. And again, the reason for doing that is to be able to identify their strengths and their development areas through these exercises. In addition, excuse me, we also inject some leadership training into the 3-day event, and there's many opportunities throughout the 3 days to interact with senior leaders and network with each other and other senior members of the organization. So, so this is just, this is the 2nd day. If you see here, we have some leadership training and some of the activities. And we round robin everybody through the activities, so each person has an opportunity to engage in this activity and be assessed. After the event is over, we take the information that we've learned from the kickoff meeting, and we put it into a feedback report, and it's customized to each person. and On Point Consulting helps us with that, and actually puts the reports together for us. And then we have calls with the participant, their supervisor, and their HR manager to walk through the results. We're actually doing that right now with the cohort that just started. Their first meeting was in October, where we did the assessments, and we're just now getting to putting the feedback reports together. From that, the idea of getting the feedback report is to then take the gaps, the skill gaps that are identified, and also the strengths that are identified, and put them into a development plan so that they can follow that then for the rest of the year. Our program is a year-long thing, so they will follow that development plan for a year. As far as ongoing development, we take a look at whether or not there were any themes that came out of the October event to see whether or not there is something that we should be addressing as a group in our on-site meetings that we conduct. And we put them, well, we have 3 meetings that are on-site throughout the year. One for us one is in February, one is in June, and one is in September. We bring them on site and we give them a variety of training, some business knowledge, and as I said, we have them work on their action learning team meetings at that point as well. If there is something that we've identified from as I said, themes from the October meeting, we introduce it throughout the year. For instance, last year it was very apparent that the group really needed some work on presentation skills. They really needed work on coaching. So throughout the year we injected a session on presentation skills, we injected something on coaching, etc. The action learning teams, as I said, we gave out topics at that point, and then throughout the year they work on developing their themes to do the presentation in September. So in essence, in terms of the development of these folks, there's really 2 ways of looking at it. It's the individual and what we work up for them individually to work on their skill gaps throughout the program, and also for group development in terms of what we do in the on-site meetings. One of the things I wanted to mention, as it says here, there's a variety of things that we do for the individual, and different experiences throughout the year, but one of the things that we do in terms of the e-learning resources, we engaged Skillsoft, I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, as an online tool that gets at, it's something called the Leadership Advantage, and it is leadership training online. So we also sign them up for a subscription for that as well. And there's a variety of things that we do individually for these folks throughout the year. And then, of course, the group development. In terms of outcomes, we've had nothing but great results from engaging in this program, both from the standpoint of the individuals that go through it, but also as far as the company is concerned. You know, you can use something like this as a recruitment tool. There's a lot of excitement around the fact that we now have a program for those that are interested in moving up. So we got a lot of nice feedback in terms of that, as far as that's concerned. As far as the participants are concerned, we've got nothing but great feedback from the folks that have gone through it. We've had, since the program began, and to date, we've had 7 people be promoted into those, either the AD position or the assistant area director role. So we've had 7 people be promoted, and as I said, we've gotten some great feedback. Now, one of the other things that's happened this year, because things went so well in the first year, we've now expanded it to include folks from corporate who will follow a very similar track. You know, we'll be together for leadership training, and there might be some divergence in terms of what their activities are, but for the most part, they'll follow the same track. So, so far we've gotten great feedback from the participants and also senior leadership as well. Here's some comments that folks have made, you know, saying things that they enjoyed from the program. I won't read them for you.
Thanks, Justine. So I think the outcomes really do speak for themselves. And as Justine mentioned, we're on the second cohort, and we have learned and I think applied some of those lessons, like the talent review meeting that Justine was mentioning earlier, and we've enhanced things over time and made some tweaks. So hopefully this case study gives you a good feel for, you know, what a proactive program really looks like. And I think really the payoff, as Justine can attest, is having that pipeline of talent ready when needed. So, you know, AmeriGas now has, through the second cohort that we're just finishing, a pretty decent pipeline of people who are ready now or who will be ready soon, candidates for the area director role, which is great. In the past, they've had to go externally in many cases and incurred costs for recruiting and had some turnover and things like that. So this definitely will reduce the need for external hires if you have that bench who are sort of ready, who are willing to relocate if necessary, et cetera. And you know, I think one of the other benefits is that people really feel like, you know, you're investing in them. So that tends to have a really positive impact on retention and employee engagement. And then finally, when you are ready to promote people, we feel much more confident that these individuals will be set up for success. So, you know, unlike in past situations where we may have had to promote someone who we thought was a good manager, but not necessarily ready to take on this type of additional scope or scale, they may not have been successful in the role. But having this type of process in place will certainly make sure that the folks who are ready will be much more successful. And I think the bottom line here is that taking that proactive approach instead of, you know, waiting for a position to become available and not having someone there to step up will help your company enhance their ROI and I think more importantly avoid the talent shortage. So with that, we're coming up to the end of our time. Justine and I would like to open it up to any questions.